All right. Okay. Welcome everyone. How's it going? How's the audio? How's everything? Everything correct? Everything good? We should be we should be live and well. Hello, hello. All right, let's take a look at this. All right, we've got people connecting properly. All right, so everything should be all right. Apologies for that. I had set up the stream, but for some reason, which like I why would it do that? YouTube decided that the stream should be sent to private, you know, and it was not allowing me to click on the visibility. So I had to stop it and start again. And oh my God, this is way too complex. Like, why would you have a stream that is private? You streaming to yourself or something? I don't know. There might be a use for it. Anyways, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope you're ready for some action. I'm not going to be activating my camera today, so you're not going to be seeing my long. Who's this guy? Nicolas Cage in this sort of what's the name of the movie? I love that movie. The guy has a great hair. Was it Con Air? You won't see my Con Air hair today. Con Air hair. I love that. Anyways, no, it's just because I want all the screen to be visible as much as possible so that we can check out what we're going to be doing. And today, um, I'm going to be working on the first part of the essentials of texturing. That's going to be planning, initial material definition, and how to generate. Did I say definition? Planning, material definition, and surface interest. So, um, that being said, like we're gonna be enrolling in quite a difficult task in terms of like time. One of the one of the most difficult aspects of texturing is and will always be spending the necessary amount of time that you need in order to get the results that you want. Okay, so we're going to set rules. So, what is the first rule to get a good texture? To spend time on it. Okay, so rule number one, we're going to be doing rules for good textures. Spend a good time on it, spend the necessary time on it. There's there's great ways to speed up the process, but of course, um, that's never going to that's never going to override the need for spending time on creating interesting details. Okay, I tend to break this rule a lot. I tend to try to rush to get results quickly, and that's one of the worst enemies of texturing. Okay, the second rule is going to be to trust the process. This is a process. This is not um, a one-step type of like deal. Creating a texture, and we will see this when it comes to layers and also in material definition, um, takes a couple of different steps, and an interesting base material will always or also sorry takes those necessary amounts of steps. If we go ahead and run through those steps or not spend that time, or try to somehow hack our way through the process, then the results aren't going to be correct. And I say this because it's another one of my enemies when it comes to texturing. I feel like, oh, this isn't looking great, but it's just because I've done one of the steps and I try to get the first steps perfect without actually focusing on the rest of the process. Okay, so layering is part of the process, and without layering, sometimes a material will not look um, good. And the third rule that we're going to apply is we're going to improve on reality, or improve reality on top of reality. So the way we can improve on reality is by first looking at reality, which is going to be our references. What does improving on reality mean? It means I take my references, and sure, I take them as a guide, but if there's something that can be improved or made more interesting, then I will take those steps to do that. So my references, they're going to be my guide. They're never going to be my chains. okay? I don't want to be enslaved by my references. Speaking of, what we're going to be texturing today is this Leica M2 black paint. And we're going to be generating a couple of the layers to create these very interesting materials. There is a lot to unpack here, including one of the most challenging aspects of creating textures, which is creating seemingly boring materials and making them interesting. Because if we were to look at some reference of this is just a black flat color with not much on it, right? So this is going to be quite a challenge, and it's going to require us to trust the process quite a bit, but also to improve on reality, okay? The first thing I've done is a little bit of research. I think that's control click to open. I found this website in which we have an auction, and auction sites are some of the best places where you can find clean references, not just for understanding what we need to do, but also for extracting details that we can apply to our own models. I could easily crop this and create an alpha out of this in order to texture my, the rewind wheel. So I have placed the work files. I am missing the PRF, which I'll add later, but I have added this Substance Painter file to the description of this video so that if you want, you can follow along. This is a model of mine. Like I made it, and I made it with the intention to texture as much detail as I can to the camera itself, but not so much to the cap. Okay, so if we go into our UVs, the body cap is the only part that is quartered, but the rest of the model is uniquely unwrapped. It is done at a 2:1 texture, which hasn't been cropped yet, since Substance Painter, if you know a bit, is going to be a little complex to texture 2:1 texture, so essentially non-squares. So after finishing these textures, I'll go through the process of cropping half of them and fixing my model so that I can I fully stretch it all the way up. I feel like, there we go. Okay. So there's probably a lot more rules that I'm going to want to write over here. But for now, what I want to do is I want to start. So let's see. I've gathered these references and I'm using PRF to organize them. And when it comes to references, it's very important to do some proper research. So according to my research for cameras like these, a lot of people tend to fake this effect, which is called brassing. Okay, this sort of this is made out of brass, painted brass, and it looks this sort of golden brassy color, orange almost in some areas. And this is naturally worn out by our fingers or the photographer's fingers. But a lot of people tend to just grab sandpaper and get those details. Okay, so it is important not to fall into false or references that don't follow the story that we want to tell. In this case, we want to tell the story of a naturally worn out camera, not so much somebody who thought, oh, that's a cool effect, I'm gonna grab sandpaper and do it to my camera. And how can I tell this is sandpaper? It's very important to understand the shapes of details. And in this case, the shapes of our details tell us that there's been a lot of sideways friction. So we can see here almost the path that this sandpaper has followed. Why have I kept this reference then? I like the amount of detail that I'm getting on this base material. I can see a lot of fine particles of dust, the sort of noises that are being generated, almost like some sort of color noise, almost pearlescent. So it's a very interesting reference for a very high, a very close up shot of the details that I'm maybe not getting in references like this, in which maybe the lighting being a lot more flat doesn't bring out as many of the features of this black paint as I would maybe want to create. because at the end of the day, one of the rules that we have created is that we're going to improve on reality. So this, I think, this sort of color noise could be a great improvement for this sort of like black paint. I've also kept some general references. For example, this sort of what happens if I change the base color to brown instead of like so much gold. It might create an interesting effect. Then I have a couple different layouts of how that wear can happen. Maybe a little bit more like that, maybe a little bit more like that, maybe this, or that. But generally, I'm going to be following this as my main story and my main reference. Okay. All right. So when it comes to planning, I can see that my camera is going to need a couple of different materials. And one of the first steps that I'm going to follow is a very crude material definition just to understand the pieces that I have to create for my camera. So let's get something general, maybe something like this. And I can understand from this that I have, let's see. Okay, so I have the black paint. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating these like base materials. So black paint. I'm going to group this and I'm going to call this black paint. Okay, so far that's all I need. I might duplicate, and to make things easier, I'm just going to call this base, and this will be my leatherette. This is not fully leather, or at least I don't think it is, although I might want to do some research. On some newer models, I know that this is some sort of like rubberized or treated leather, which is generally called leatherette. So it's a little bit more, you know, so if we do like a leatherette, well, you can, or vulcanite also. But I think like since this is probably, let's see, like an M2 from the 50s, it's going to probably be real leather. So this is stuff that it's interesting that you start to understand like what it is. If you're going to make a model that you don't understand properly, it's important that you do some research on what these materials could be. It could be leather, it could be other things. I think from the time, probably it's going to be leather. I think in the 50s, plastic was already a thing, of course, but it was recently invented. I think plastics were invented in World War I or World War II. So it's important to understand how common these things were. Yeah, so plastics invention. So for example, 1907. So it's quite recent. So since this is probably about 75 years old already, we're going to think that since their invention to the like the common acquisition from the public, you know, molding leather plastic wasn't like a thing yet. So we're going to assume that it's leather. Although because we're not going to be doing this first, I'll take some time to do some research. So we have the leather and the base, and then we have some glass and some metals, like this part. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a miscellaneous folder. And right now, this miscellaneous folder is going to go all the way to the bottom of my stack. Yeah, whatever, the bottom of my layers. And I'm going to add a white mask to it so that everything is this sort of miscellaneous material. And I'm going to use this with a purpose, which is to visualize what hasn't been textured yet. So I'm going to use this red color for now. I don't want to be creating every single material, so this is fine. So I'll do color, roughness, and I'll do the roughness like this so that it's not bothering me. And I'll quickly start to mask what is black paint. And I can do this in like different ways. I can use my polygon fill, okay, and start to select islands and then mask out of them properly. But in this file, I have created, and they should be available, anchor points. So if you go and create a black mask with a fill, And in this grayscale, you choose an anchor point. There should be, for example, this leather mask, okay? And if you go into the levels and invert it, then you should be resulting with like this selection. That should be the result of that operation. Okay, so with this black paint now, I can understand, I can create something like a paint layer on top of this, set it to linear dodge. When it comes to masks, I'm not sure how much I have to get into the basics of substance, but I think it's very, very important to understand, like when you want to texture properly, it is really important to understand the logic of blending modes. Okay, so let's quickly go through that. The ones that I use the most are subtract, multiply, multiply, and add. Okay, so if you don't have to pay a lot of attention, but if you do, you'll understand that subtract is a mathematical operation, multiply is the same, and adding is the same. So when I think about subtract, multiply, and add toward masks, I'm understanding grayscale values. Grayscale values go in 3D or in like bitmaps. Okay, we're not gonna get into like there is values on top of 1 and below 0 in 3D. Like we can do that for shaders, for materials in Substance Designer. But when it comes to Painter and bitmaps, everything goes on a range from 0 to 1, at least on the way that is after baked into the texture. Okay, so if 0 is black and 1 is white, when I have a black texture or a white texture in this case, okay, and I subtract from this white texture, I subtract another white texture, 1 minus 1. Okay, let's do it like this because that's a lot of dragging and dropping. But 1 subtracted to 1 will equal 0. Okay. So if you start to understand these blending modes as math operations, it's going to be easy to predict the results. So if I subtract white, then I'll get black. If I multiply something by white, then the result will be whatever. Let's use maybe a times 1. So whatever it is, let's use x multiplied by 1 will result in x. Okay, x multiplied by 0 will result in 0. So if I multiply whatever value on the mask by 1, I'll get no alteration. And if I multiply it by 0, then I'm masking out. Okay, and then if I'm using add linear dodge, so what I'm doing is adding, okay, with a cap of 1. If I do 1 plus 1, I'm gonna get 1 because there is nothing on top of 1 again when we bake these bitmaps. So if I do 0.25 and I do a linear dodge and this is on 0, for example, what I'll get is the value of the mask, and this is what I want to do right now. Essentially, I've set this paint to linear dodge with the expectation that all the black areas of this will result, let's see, that should, yes, that should not, that should be, I should be seeing the leather in red. Okay. So essentially, I've done it incorrectly because I was coming from a bad base. So what I would need to do here is subtract. I can subtract or multiply. So if I subtract with a value of 1, whatever I select, and I can select, for example, here, whole elements. If I select this element with 1, I'm subtracting white from white, and I'm resulting in black. Or if what I want to do is add to my black paint, which is the intended operation, I can do linear dodge. So essentially adding 1, and I can start to select. I can't believe it that I don't have like one reference that is showing me. Okay, there we go. Like, what can I use for this? Maybe this. This is a different model, but it can do the work. So in essence, all right, that doesn't exist, but I'm gonna take it that it's that. That part is metal, so I'll set it to black. Essentially, I want to subtract it, but I can't because I'm using add. So if I add black, I'm essentially not adding anything. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call this add. So it's adding to my mask. And then I'm going to have another paint layer that's going to be called subtract. And I'll set this to subtract. So I don't want this on my mask. And I'll subtract white. So this way I don't have to be changing the colors. I could be doing multiply and add, but if I multiply and add, I have to shift through black and white all the time. This is something I don't want to do. So let's see. I want to add this. I'm not sure about the thing at the bottom. That's already white. I most likely want to, subtract that. So all I need to do is be changing here. There's probably an easier way where you just have to X, but I want to do it on like a non-distractive. So I want to subtract this, this, and this, because I know they're actually that that should be white. The inside shouldn't be. For now, I'm going to, for now, I'm just going to subtract it. And then some of these details will also need to be subtracted. Although right here they look painted, but I am subtracting them on purpose right now because I want to treat them slightly differently. So I'm saving that for later. Okay, so essentially now what I have is the black paint, and I'll just set it to black. PBR doesn't accept values darker than 272727. Okay. This is essentially, if you go into physicallybased.info, a lot of people recommend using the PBR checker. Like, sure, if it's a production requirement, you do that. But generally, I tell my student to like just keep good practice, because like using a PBR checker is like a step in which you have to do a lot of fixing if you're not careful. Charcoal is the darkest color in the PBR chart. If we go and set this to I think we can just do sRGBX. We're gonna get 272727. And sure, Mario, everybody's gonna get a recording on this sorry, because this is going to stay on YouTube, so you're safe. So obviously this is very black. We can see it's super black. All right, and I'll speed this part up because it's going to take a second and we're already quite okay. So I can add a black mask, add a fill, and pretty much with my anchor point I can say leather mask. Okay, and check this thing, fill. I think I need to invert it, and then add a paint to subtract from these parts over here, this whatever isn't leather essentially, which is everything except for that part. I think this is leather, so this should be like that. Okay, there we go. And then the screws, in which like we can just go in. I'm not sure if I have them on an anchor point, but just maybe so that you understand what that is. If you go into this sculpting layer, and let me just quickly go ahead and group this into our texturing layer so that I can quickly collapse it and open my sculpting, you should find all of these details having added to Substance Painter. So essentially what this camera looks like without this sculpting is like this. It pretty much has nothing. And I have created all the details inside of Substance Painter to make it very easy to access those details and to change them if I need to. Why would I do that? Why would I not have it from a high poly? Like all these lines, all of that, that's easy to just paint, you know, to model. But unfortunately, like if I ever want to make the decision to, for example, peel this leather and bring it above, it makes it a little bit difficult. But if I have it in Substance, I can just paint that on top and I don't have to go back and forth between software. So this is pretty non-destructive and I really like that. So let's see. That should be on like that. And everything is like most details, a lot of those details are created like that. Like for example, over here, with the help of a little bit of parallax, that looks really good. after all. Like the latch here is also created with a projection. So it is pretty much flat except for the silhouette. Let's see. So we might be doing this on the flat screws. No. Okay. Leather separation, general lines. Flat screw leather. Okay, here it is. Pretty well named. And then flat screw lines. So if I alt click on this mask, I can see that all of these are white dots. And I can, again, because I have all this information about like the logic on subtracting and so on, I can understand that if I subtract these white points essentially, or if I can capture these white points, I can subtract them. So what I'm going to do is right click and use an anchor point for this. Flat screw line. I'll keep that as so and go back to my texturing, add a fill, and pretty much take that anchor point, flat screw line, okay? And as you can see here, I can just go ahead and subtract it from the leather. And now it's not leather anymore. So we have our screws being shown on top of the leather, okay? So my leather is also going to be quite dark. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and do that 272727. Okay. And over here, like obviously this right now is just, we just converted stuff into, instead of white, now it's black and with some hints of red. But in essence, like, and in reality, what we did is we separated all the materials in our model. So the fact that they're black is just what it is. So now let's start creating this plastic base. If you want to create very interesting materials, the key is noise. Okay, there is a very good article by Malte Rosenberg, I think. I might be writing that incorrectly. I apologize. 3D art. I might be getting the surname incorrectly. Sorry. 3D. Let's do noises, and I'll be able to find it. Yeah. This is sorry, Rosenberg. Sorry about that. In any case, this article is really good, and it explains the importance of noises in texturing. Okay, everything is composed of noise, little speckles, little grains. At the end of the day, if we think about the world, it's atoms, you know. So when it comes to how an image is composed, this is going to come from noise. And so if we can create this noise effectively, we can create good detail on our textures. Now, this noise can come from textures. For example, for wood, I'll create these noises from textures. But when it comes to plastics, paint, all of this, I'll be creating these noises in substance. So let's see. So I have my base color, metallic, roughness, normal, height, ambient occlusion, and then I have noises and displacement. So the way that I'm going to be creating my noises in order to capture them and take them into my base color and roughness is by creating user channels. So if I click on the plus here, user channels, and I create my user 0, I can call this noises. And now if I create an empty fill layer, I have this available to me. Okay, so bear with me here because this is going to be a little bit of a ride. I'm going to alt click on noises so that I only activate this, and I'll see my way into my noises layer. And I'm going to call this like paint noise. Paint noise. So I'm going to be essentially creating the grayscale version of this noise. Let's see. The first layer of noise most likely will be, I'll just do it on a fill layer. So my main layer is empty. I do this out of organization, because like I can grab all of these and use blending modes, because at the end of the day, again, this is why the logic of blending modes is so important. I can keep this very organized and blend everything in one single material, or one single layer. Now, I don't have proof of this, that this theory is correct, but a lot of people tell me that my substance materials are very easy to open. Like they don't take a lot. They're not super convoluted. They're not heavy on the computer. And I have the feeling that it's because of this, because of not having 50 different layers to create one single detail, but trying to collapse as much as possible into one single material via fills, filters, and so on. Now, again, no proof, but things point that way. I would love to maybe have someone from, you know, Adobe telling me, or from Substance telling me that's right, that's wrong. But anyways, in any case, if it's more expensive or not, what it is for sure for me, it's better in terms of organization. So this paint noise, the base, I'm going to do a blue noise, or just like my noise, base noise. And I'm going to alt click on noises, look for noise, and either white noise or blue noise will help. I like white noise. And this is the most basic type of noise that you can have. So let's use a triplanar projection so that we can get a little bit, that's lower resolution because it's a different shader, and essentially I'm going to be texturing that in engine, not so much over here, so I don't need that to be high res. And also, just a thing to note is texel density. When you apply this noise, like you can see how pretty much on every area the size of the UV islands is the same. So when you create a texture, sorry, a 3D model, and you unwrap it, it is very important that all the areas that have the same importance, okay, if I were to do the interior of the camera and it's only seen like from far away, then of course, like I'm not going to give it so much importance. But if it's seen from the outside and seen like close up, it is important to keep all UV islands at a similar resolution, okay? Not just crazily scale up and down. So that's why I don't like using a lot of the automatic UV unwrappers that, sorry, not unwrappers, but UV packers that are out there, because a lot of those algorithms will mess with the scale if you don't control that properly. So I recommend that you keep that in mind when packing your UVs. Again, this is not important because it's a completely different shader, piece of glass, transparency, and I don't need a lot for that. Anyways, the simplest type of noise is white noise. And I'm going to be using this white noise to create my base. So if I can start to strip this material, what I can see is that I have a couple of layers of that noise. I have like a very high contrast one. This is these sort of white dots. But then where those white dots aren't present, so over here, that sort of noise is still there, but in a very very low contrast. So I'm going to start with the bottom layer first and then start to build up. So we can start playing with this noise. I think for now, this is how I'm going to keep it. I'm going to add a second layer of noise, or what I could do in essence, well, I think, yeah, we could create that second layer of noise in a second. This noise now is boring. Okay, we have this noise. It's just noise, and it has no variation. So we're going to be creating this variation. The way I like to do this is by filtering and creating a slow blur. So if we slow blur this noise and we do it at a very low intensity, what we can start to do is we can start to change the size of the grains of this noise. I'm going to divide the intensity by something like 10. Okay, and very slowly you can see how some of the areas are pretty much kind of like this. We're getting a different pattern than we were before. You can replace on the blending mode, which essentially will just replace the detail, or you can use something like linear dodge. If you linear dodge your slow blur, you have to be on the correct layer here. So if you linear dodge here, or maybe let's see, one thing that I do sometimes is I just set one of this and I start to scroll up and down until, for example, there, lighten seems to blend properly and kind of even create this effect in which it's lowering the contrast of some of the areas. So Danwar is asking, noises channel is coming from where? So it's coming from a custom channel. If you click plus here, user channels, you can create custom channels. If you double click on them, you can call it whatever. So in this case, I call it noises, but you can call it something like customs. And then it's going to appear here and also here and also here. So it's a tool that I use to create channels that I might need at some point. Because noises is grayscale, one thing I forgot to mention, we might want to just make it a linear 8 texture. So it's a little cheaper. So as you can see, I'm creating a little bit of variation over that noise. That's type of variation that we're seeing here, kind of like blurring some of these and keeping some of that sharp. If I do that on a higher intensity, you can see the effect better, but I want to keep movements subtle. And this is one of the nicest things that you can do for textures generally. Keep things subtle. Now, obviously, there's cases in which subtlety doesn't get very far. If we're doing a wall with a huge moss leak, subtlety is not our friend. But when we're detailing hard surface, this subtlety added on top of subtlety on top of subtlety multiple times creates layering. And layering is key for realism and good details. So that sort of blur slope looks nice. I'm going to set it to like 90% or maybe 75% opacity. I think we're getting a very nice custom noise. Maybe 75 is very low. And this is where trusting the process kind of becomes important. I could stay for hours like, oh, what's the perfect opacity? Like leave hyper perfectionism on the door when you come to the office, please. I have the biggest difficulties when it comes to that. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. We can do a lot of things to control this, like slow blur. We can blur it so that we can create less distortion. We can tile it so that we create more high frequency patterns, so on and so forth. So I'm going to undo all of that because I like this sort of, I like this pattern very much. But I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm probably going to tile it a little bit more so that I can create some other type of high frequency noise, something that is a little larger. I'm not seeing that, but I think I will like it. And I'll set it to like maybe 50% opacity. Now, I'm not sure that was a good move. So maybe 35, and we'll see if we can benefit from the subtlety there. Let's see. Andrea is saying, pay attention. Okay, that's good for the chat. Okay, but I learned from Javi that it might be better to focus on one thing and then use that to extract color and roughness. Yes, exactly. So that's the next step. I'm going to aim to keep things simple. Let's just keep one blur slope. And with that, I'm going to create a second noise layer. So I'm going to add a fill, and I'm going to call this noise. We can call this maybe like spots, because we do have those spots. You can see them from a distance. They're there. And you might be thinking, like, where are those bubbles coming from? Where are we? When are we making them throughout this process? That is the detailing of the base material, and it will come a little later once we have settled with an interesting base that can be used everywhere without having to worry about the position of the surface. What do I say by that? With that, if you pay attention to this sort of peeling, it's happening at very key areas. It's not happening everywhere. So this is kind of like an added sort of detail. So not important right now. We're just doing, imagine we're cropping this square and we're tiling it all over the texture. So that's what we're, sorry, all over the model. That's what we're doing. So these spots, again, we go into the noises layer, and I have an incredible set of textures here. I don't have any, like, this, I think everybody uses this. This is surface imperfections. If you Google that, you'll find this and it's this product, Surface Imperfections Volume 1. It contains some of the best quality textures that I've ever seen, and it's invaluable as a resource. So I'm going to be looking for, let's see, I really like the dust surface imperfection. So I'm going to go into my assets, textures, surface imperfections. Let's see, can I make this a little larger? Yeah. So deposits could be cool. Let's take a look maybe at maybe specs leather, although we're not doing leather. So this could be a great resource for you guys to use if you wanted to, but I think it would be fair to get this as much as possible, okay? Because these are must-haves. I'm not necessarily talking about surface imperfections, but custom grunges is one of the things that is going to launch your texturing, okay? Like super far. Really important that you go ahead and secure like one pack. Maybe you can go and scan some, like throw some pieces of paper on the floor and scan them with like a flatbed scanner. You're gonna get alphas from that. And I'm sure you can find ways to learn how to do that. I recommend if you go into learning and you look for I mean, you should find it on, it's Rick Grief has a great tutorial about extracting alphas. So invaluable resources. You should definitely do that. But I mean, for this one, we can go with the starter assets. I think we can go into procedurals maybe and look for maybe some spots. Yeah, and we're gonna have grunge spots. They're really not the best, but I think we can do something with them. So let's just put in some noises and start experimenting. So let's maybe up the contrast a bit and the balance and start to feel or to get a feel for what that's doing. So let's do triplanar projection maybe so that we can get a few more. Let's see, contrast, maybe a bit more balance. Scale it up a bit, and we can start to get those little spots right there. So let's pay attention again to the logic. I have white spots that I want to add into gray or white or black, sorry. So what should I do? Add linear dodge, okay? And now I have those little dots. They might not be very visible the moment you go from normal to there, to linear dodge, but they're definitely there when we click and unclick. If you feel like that you want to balance the contrast, you might want to add in between layers. Like for example, you could do this with complex filters, not complex filters, but you could complexify this with filters. You can use stuff like, I don't know, clamps. Like I hate these new icons. They've been there for a while there already, but so you can play with them with like clamping and so on. Or like what I do if I need to balance something out is either using levels. So I'll just do levels, noises, and try to get this a little darker. And as you can see now, our dots really stand out. Sorry. So let's put this at 0.5 maybe. So now our base noise is kind of toned down and our little spots stand out a little bit more. So maybe we can do a little bit more contrast, a little bit more balance, a little bit more contrast. Maybe let's not go full contrast. We don't want full black and whites. If you check Rick's tutorial, you'll figure out why. And also throughout this process, surely you will also figure out why. So that's spots. And then I might want some spots that are a little bit more like this noise. So let's go ahead, and I might want this noise, but with a much lower balance and higher contrast. So something like this. We said that we had two types. We have this sort of underlying noise, which is kind of like low contrast. I think this is what we have. And I would most likely use this before this noise. So I'll do something like that where we have these sort of higher frequency spots. So let's do linear dodge add, and then our larger spots are again not so very visible. I'll duplicate these levels and just tone that down 0.75 plus our spots. So we should have quite a decent amount of noises here, but I'm not very comfortable with how noisy this feels, ironically, right? This feels super noisy. This I know that is noisy, but it's subtle and kind of like low contrast. Okay, but I might want to like tone this down just a bit. Hello, hello everybody. Welcome, welcome to the stream. I'm not saying hello to people, but hello. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them, by the way. So we can maybe go like 65% on that sort of higher frequency noise. I think that's still a lot. So we're gonna hand adjust maybe something like that. So we're adding sharpness to this texture by adding that noise. Like if we look at the grand scheme of things, so maybe not grand scheme, but if we look at the bigger picture, that is most likely just adding sharpness, which is what I'm like what I'm seeing here. Contrast tends to create this effect of like sharpening things. Okay, so once I have this paint noise set up with all these layers, I have to transfer them to the base color somehow. Sorry about that. So I'm going to be adding an anchor point, and I'm just going to leave the default noise. Now back to my texturing layers. This is not my leather, it's not my miscellaneous. What I'm going to do with this miscellaneous is I'm just going to make it fully black so that it disappears, but I don't like have that sort of ugly noise. How do you know which kind of blend option is better? So this sort of table that I explained at the beginning is what helps me understand what blend option is better. Yes, we can read you Slaven. I can't actually. I can't read. I can't. Who's like? Not sure if that's like an old question, but I actually cannot see Slaven's messages. That's funny. Slaven, you're always shadow banned everywhere, man. I wonder why. But sorry, like the question, how do you know which kind of blend option is better is by understanding the rules of logic and applying your logic. Okay? Like at least for me, I'm a very logic based learner, and if I understand the logic of something, then I'll make sure I can apply it properly, or I'll be sure I can apply it properly. And then testing is a great way. So for example, if we go back to our noises and we don't know exactly, let's go here, we don't know exactly what should be the best blending mode, you can just start by normal, and as long as that's blue, you can use your arrow keys up and down to kind of go. You can see how that's changing, replace, multiply, and you can go up and down until you find the right one. So subtract is creating those spots as black, and you can see how it's giving you like different effects. I also learned through scrolling the blend option, but then when I started to be a teacher, people started to ask these questions like, how do you know what does what? And it doesn't look professional to say, well, I actually just go in and scroll, you know? So you kind of have to understand what you're doing. And it helped me very much understand what or why I'm doing things, you know? So it's good to have the logic also, because without logic, you cannot problem solve. And brute forcing problem solving is a very common thing for people like me who learn like by scrolling through, right? You don't understand something, it fails, you just keep scrolling through until you brute force your way out of a problem. But it unfortunately is a lot more difficult than understanding what you're doing. But anyways, let's go back to what we're doing. So in the black paint, in the base, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be applying a fill layer. I'm going to maintain my 2727 base color. And also, speaking of base color, I think I didn't do one thing that is quite important. Yes, I did. Okay. So if you go into the tone mapping, the function here should be aces. You can do linear color and then activate a color profile. If you're using Unreal Engine 5, you could be using Rec 709. If by default, that's what Unreal is using. But for me, for Marmoset, I just use aces, or for Unity or Godot, aces is also available. So you know that you're getting the same colors in both engines. Like we can look at tone mapping at some point. Right now, let's just set it to aces, because this is the standard for most programs. It used to be the standard for Unreal also. They used aces in Unreal 4. So yeah, if you set your function to aces, then you're getting compatibility in terms of color with Godot, Unity, Unreal 4, Marmoset. But always research this before making that decision. And if you don't have the color profile, maybe the company you're working for could provide you with a Substance Painter color profile. But anyways, this is important because you can see how it changes the perception of darkness. Now, our 2727 is almost black in the aces color tone mapping, but like with linear, it's a very light gray, or a very dark gray, sorry, but not fully black. So it's important to set these colors properly. So anyways, with this base, I want to keep my color, and on the fill, I'm going to add a fill that I'll rename to noise recover. And you're going to see me name things. When you're working for your own portfolio, you're never or almost never going to be sharing your files with people. But where you're working professionally, if you get sick and somebody has to take your model because, you know, it's a very high priority asset that needs to be delivered the next day, and some peer takes your file and everything is called fill layer 1, fill layer 2, fill layer 3, fill layer 4. I've had to take people's files that were like that, and it was a huge nightmare. So name things, please. It costs nothing. And even yourselves, like, you will get confused if you don't have proper naming. Okay. I've seen this. Like, somebody comes to me with a problem and I'm like, can you share your screen and show me? And they're like, okay, which layer is it? Is it this one? Is it that one? So when you have all these layers, it is normal to kind of get lost and not know how to name it. But somehow you'll find it. You saw me struggle to find this, but in a pinch, you like just get the name right. Thanks to, like, you get it right thanks to the name. So important to keep those things in mind. Anyways, noises recover. Okay, base color, anchor points, and I'm going to get my. I should have a paint noise. Okay, and there it is. So we see nothing. If I go into my base color, what I'm seeing is black. This is because my reference channel is the base color of the anchor point. So if I want to reference the noises, I have to change this base color to noises. And now in my base color, I'm having my noises. What I'm a little worried about is that, yeah, those noises feel different. They're a different color. So I think I'm going to change my linear A to sRGB. I'm not sure if that's going to help, or there's something else going on. There might be something with the way this is being captured. So let me just play with this a little bit. That doesn't seem to make a difference. Okay. So base color should be sRGB 8. So for some reason, we're not getting that. I'm not sure if that's a bug or whatever. So in here, it's when we're going to start to not trust so much the software, and we're going to start to trust our eyes. Okay. I can live with the difference. I can still see the detail the way that I wanted it, but it's important to, yeah, it's important to keep this in mind. I can also adjust things from the base color and make sure that that is what I wanted to have. It's completely okay. So anyways, this noise recover now brings all of this to my base color. So I have some sort of like color noise. One of the things that I can do and that I like doing very much is taking a little screenshot of the colors that I want, okay? And then I'll save this into my essentials of texturing, and I'll call this maybe gradient maps. And this is my black paint underscore colors. Okay. And then if I go to that folder, and then gradient maps, black paint colors, I bring this over here and I'll put this as a texture into my gradients folder, into my assets. I'm not sure. Okay, I accidentally painted. All right, I'll save that again and reload it. Okay, and I should have this. Now, this isn't super useful right now. It's super blurry and screwed up, but we have a lot of colors here that I might want to use. If I add a filter, and I use the gradient, we can use gradient dynamic, and gradient dynamic asks for an image input. So I can bring that in, and as you can see, we have a ton of color variation now, and I can change my gradient position to kind of get the different colors out of the image that I took. Okay, so if I start to maybe do other areas, I can maybe choose something like this. All right, and then that should be saved on top. Did I do that already? I'm not sure. I'll do it again. I reload this and I place that there. So now I should be getting those colors. So maybe, for example, that would be similar. Of course, we're getting a lot of blues. So it's important to color correct all of this. But if we revert back to Malte, okay, I'm going to be making the same mistake on the name because my short-term memory is terrible. But if we go back to the noises, this is in essence what we should be doing. Creating interesting variations in the surface. Just because something is black doesn't mean that it's one color of black. So just because something is gold doesn't mean that it's just one color of gold. It has variations on that color. Okay, so we can do that again with this gradient dynamic, or we can do it by hand with I'll just search gradient, normal gradient. So a normal gradient will remap our grayscale. So what this is saying is that on position 1, sorry, on position, on position 0, so if we again apply logic, 0 is black, 1 is white. So on position 0, aka black, we're going to apply color 1, okay? So if on color 1, which on the normal gradient, we don't have any black, this is something we should have. We should use the full potential, the full range of our noise if we want to be using logic correctly. So that means I want to have stuff coming from black all the way to white. So I'll be collapsing my levels so that they start when the information start and they end when the information ends. So right there. Okay, so now I have blacks and I have white. I have also increased contrast, which is something I might not want. So again, this is a moment in which logic and art kind of fight each other. So I'm just going to test both ways. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing what to do and testing something, okay? Actually, it's not that there's nothing wrong with it. It's the desired way to get the information that you need. It's important to not know where you want to go in order to know where you want to go. So I'll be getting this gradient, and for example, I can use this to capture blacks, or that sort of, I can just use 272727 because I know that this is the darkest part, and maybe I can pull this up a little bit so that I can artificially create that contrast. And then white, for example, could be that green area. And if I only have two colors, I'm blending between these two, and it looks absolutely terrible. But if I start adding quantity of colors. So for example, I do 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, and I start to get the different colors. So this, and then maybe that blue. Like what could start to happen is that I get interesting noises. Not what happened, not it's not what happened, what's happening right now, because in my experience, this gradient is quite difficult to control. Okay, you have to spend a lot of time. So one of the rules that we set for ourselves was spend time on it, right? So if you need very custom colors, spend time on it. I don't. I just need an interesting color variation, because remember, we're using this reference as an exaggeration of reality. When we look at our normal reference, it is just a flat color, most of it. Okay, so I am okay with using the gradient map, okay, and having maybe a little bit more of like a speedy result given to me. So something like this, plus now playing with this stuff, or recapturing like a couple of times what I'm doing, that's also valid. You can play with your levels. Or in this case, you could just go ahead, add a filter, and hue saturation lightness, HSL, without the comma. Oh my God, I hate this filter. I'll just look for it here. They killed me when they started to add these icons. I was used to the older ones so much. Anyways, we can just use like a lower saturation here, I think. Although in that case, what we're doing is we're killing kind of the purpose of creating this gradient. So maybe we can start playing with some color blends. So let's start taking a look at that. So what if I do that, and then I do that, and then I do like linear dodge? What if I do that with an HSL in the middle, like to try to remove some saturation, and then just get this gradient, maybe on color even. No, because that's gonna color too much. So maybe linear dodge. Okay. That's super different. Like if we go into the material, whoop, we're applying these gradients to more channels than we need to. So this should just be on color. But we are creating like a incredibly noisy result. So that's good to have like as a base. But now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to recover this material, which is the 2.7, as part of like a fill. And this is going to be my base color correction. And this might be the lazy approach right now, but it is important to create a system. So you can see how that's a lot. And if we let that all go through, it is a lot. So maybe we can leave this like at 90%. We have to create a system that makes the work easy. And for me, the more I get stuck on a step, the more difficult it gets. Because I started to kind of like suffer from this, I'm looking at this too much, therefore I'm not able to see what's right or wrong. In any case, like this material is going to get more effect from that noise in the roughness than it will be on the base color. So that is a lot of color variation, I think. So I'll do 95. That's fine. Let's do 95. I'm not sure why I'm doing is removing 2727. Let's do 95%. And we will adjust. Like we have a good way to adjust all of this. Okay. So that's all for the base color, and now I can continue to add maybe that noise recover. I can now enable my roughness. Okay, and in that roughness, I'll do the same process. I'll grab, sorry, my paint noise. And with this paint noise, I'll map it on the noises channel. So now those noises are affecting my roughness, and I can start to see that indeed I should affect my roughness more than I should affect my base color. So we can like right away, we can just grab the roughness and we can affect them over here. But I kind of don't like to do it like that, because you have to be digging through. So I like to have like levels on the side for everything. So in the end, I'll be doing base color sometimes, and for sure levels on roughness and height. In this case, we will not have height because like this doesn't have height on the noise itself. It does on the peeling, but on the bubbling, but it doesn't on the height itself. It has a different effect that we can play with, and that I'll explain now. Although I don't have it in this computer, so we're going to have to be careful with that. But anyways, levels roughness, and we're just gonna be playing with that. So we have a really shiny material, really shiny, like really shiny. So I'm gonna go into my roughness over here, and what I want is mostly black, but not fully black. So I'll do 0.1, and when I do that, what I'm doing is just blurring out. Maybe 0.1 is too much, so 0.05 will work. And then let's start to play with contrast. So I don't want a lot of that noisiness to come through, but I want some of it. Okay. And this looks super black because of the HDRI, but my PBR values should be correct. Okay. Little trick. You want your environment alignment to be with the camera, not with the world, because then it's going to be really difficult to look at a lot of areas. So for example, on the top here, if my alignment is with the world, I won't be able to ever see the top. But if it's with the camera, I can just align this to my camera and it'll be okay. I don't really feel very comfortable with having such a glossy paint. 0.075 will exaggerate the non-glossiness a little bit. Let's see. And in a way, well, not with roughness actually. No, that I was gonna say something silly. Although it would be cool. I thought for some reason. Oh, yeah. In Affinity, you get opacity for levels, which is a great thing because you can set your levels, exaggerate them a little bit, and then play with the opacity to kind of do it against what you had before. In here, like that's not a real option. Okay, so notice how I'm here, super close. I don't love doing hyper close-ups like that because you tend to miss the bigger picture. And yeah, that noise looks very grainy from this distance, but when we go to like the whole model view distance, that's already lost, it's gone. Okay, so I'm going to adjust this for model view distance. And in here already, I can already start to cope with a little bit less roughness, so 0.025 maybe. And having a little bit more contrast. So that starts to look a lot more interesting, although still a little grainy. But there's always a way to fix that graininess, and that's coming back to the noises and maybe the spots, which are most likely the ones that are creating that graininess, could be toned down. Or we could just, rather than having levels, we could add a filter for clamping. So pretty much removing some detail if we don't want it. Which is very effective over here. And this actually can be blended. So if I go into the roughness, maybe set this to like 95% or like 90%, let's see. I can just bring back that value, maybe 0.05 on the clamp, and then just play with the opacity of it. There's multiple ways to get the results that you want and that you need. All right, that's super dark as an HDRI, and I'm starting to get a little worried about that. So on the base color correction, I'm actually going to up the value to 0.2. Okay, maybe up. That's not affecting us because we have a levels on the base color. Is that it? No, it's because the clamp is affecting the base color also. So careful with that. I'm not sure why that's on by default. All right, that's already not so concerning, but I'm still going to up it to 0.2. Although, yeah, I think I'm okay with that. All right, let's quickly subtract the window pane from here and this also. Okay. And is that an interesting paint? Like maybe when compared to our reference. So we're going to check with different HDRIs. And this is something that is also very effective at painting the full picture. If you only use one HDRI, you might be getting used to the same reflectivity all the time. If I use this, my reflectivity goes to, yeah, it goes away, right? So if I get used to this HDRI too much, for example, by exaggerating the roughness here, the moment I change to something like this panorama, you can see that the effect is different, right? So in a way, I want to kind of cater for all the different or many of the different HDRIs that I can get. So I think we do need a little bit more softness on here, so 0.1, and maybe not so much contrast. So let's bring this to 0.3. And I'm not going to be micro changing, not micromanaging, but like changing this too much. I'm going to let layering do some of that work after. Because this noise is not going to be my entire material. There's going to be a lot of steps to create interesting bases. So right now we have created a base noise, but it's not necessary that this is the end result. So we can break away from this layer and work on something like base variation. And I can start to do things like adding that color noise that I really liked. Okay, so for example here, base color, I can tile this a little bit, triplanar projection, maybe tile it like 3 times, maybe 5 times. Okay, and overlaying this from the base color. Okay, and now I can start to get that sort of color noise. It should not darken my base color, but it is. So if possible, linear dodge with some levels, taking away the black values. Okay, that base is similar now. And now I can just play with the opacity. And the way that is even brightening my base color now. So that's something, again, we talked about good practice. A lot of people use the PBR checker. They just have it on the top and they just check when they mess up. I don't like doing that. It kind of leads to too many issues or too much extra work to fix things. I would prefer to maintain good practice. Yeah, I might want to go for overlay. You know what? Scroll up and down. Divide seems decent at creating this color variation. And then we can also use something else for the roughness, something, for example, like those surface imperfections that I really like. So for something like this, fingerprints work great, but it's overly used most of the time. So I'm generally just going to go for, let's say, maybe these smudges here. I'll put this on the roughness, and instantly that looks really, really nice. The problem is like it's styled 5 times because I'm using the same basis for the fractal sum. So that's why I also like to keep things basic and separated. So I will add a fill layer with the fractal sum instead. I think I did overlay or linear dodge. I'm not sure what I did in the end. I did triplanar and I tiled it 5 times. Okay, and I can see some of that color variation, which is good. So color noise. I'll add a fill, and this is going to my roughness, and this will be my surface scratches. And using levels on this, on the roughness, will help me control this. I think I'm going to also do triplanar projection. Okay. And this is, I think this has enough detail that it's already storytelling in a way. Like I have to be careful to not have scratches in like silly places. You wouldn't scratch like under here, for example, because it's not stuck like and it doesn't bend. So in a way, I have to be mindful at this point already to not add details where some areas might be protected from those details. This isn't too bad, but it's breaking directionality. As you can see, like those scratches right there, like so flat would like they look weird. So I might want to find something else. Let me try this metal aluminum. Okay, and then that brings some scratches and also some nice surface variation. Okay, let's start playing with this. So I want to create this kind of effect and then tone it down a bit. And maybe something a little bit more like that. That is overly exaggerated. I'm going to go into the roughness. And if I check and analyze my roughness, this is white details that I'm adding. So most likely what I want is linear dodge on the roughness. Okay. That's adding too much. So that's my base, and most likely I would want something like this, maybe, I don't know. Let's do 15. Okay. And I have the feeling that we're going super, super noisy, but I'm also super, super close. So again, get far away from your model. Over here and over here, there are two distances that are incredibly difficult to balance. So constantly attempting to balance them is going to take you a lot of time. And we also have to understand that we have nothing blending this. Sometimes what I will do if I'm starting to struggle with visualizing the material is I will just create these materials. Let me save this. I'll be just creating these materials on the previous sphere sample. When you do that, you don't have the distraction of lines, interruptions. What you have is a ball that looks like the painted metal that you try to do, and that's all. And you can clearly see the interest, the non-interest on a surface. Because right now this is just a tiny bit distracting, maybe. Maybe this surface is a lot less distracting and easier to see what I'm doing. I would be relatively happy with this at this point. I know for a fact that I'm going to want something cleaner, because right now what I'm doing is I'm compensating for not having any details in here. But the moment that I start to add my alphas and to break things down, I know that there's going to be a lot of noise over here. So I'm surely going to have to reduce this to something like 25, or maybe not this, but something like on the bottom layer. But definitely I'll be removing some of that noise, because again, that looks good now because it's like on the surface, but the moment that I start adding detail, there's too much detail, there's noise. not the good type of noise also. All right, so I'll be moving this projection a little bit. And it's kind of behaving properly. I'm going to have to be careful with the bigger scratches. But generally, it is working. Okay. Okay. Um, one of the things that I have that I didn't bring in, and just to kind of help this model have a better chance, or have this material a bit like give this material, sorry, a better chance to shine, is by bringing in the markings. So I have pre-added all of these for you so that you don't have to do anything when if you're following this. And I've also added an anchor point to this so that you can do whatever you need to do. For example, um, we'll do markings. Actually, we'll do Control C, white, group, markings. Why did I Control C? If I was gonna write it anyways. If I black mask this, I add a fill, grayscale, anchor point, markings. Okay, now I'll be able to see all of that, and I'm able to tell if that material is behaving the way I want. Okay, so I have my white markings. I have other color markings. There's also red ones, the B off. This is an MP, so it has the off. But yeah, that B should be, I think, should be white, and then the lightning bolt should be red. So let's duplicate white, make it red. And this is part of like, this should have been part of like the blocking out of the material when we did all the leather stuff, blah, blah, blah. So you don't have to do that right now, but it's also never a bad moment to do that, because it, as I said, it gives you a good chance at like reading the material better. Okay, so that goes there. And also I should be having another fill with these two dots. I'm not sure if I have them. Maybe it's this dots mask. Yes, correct. And these two are also red. There we go. Okay, we should do linear dodge to blend those two masks. Okay, and nothing else should be red. I think so on the back should be red. Some stuff should be. Okay, the sticker itself. We'll get that at some other point. Okay, but as you can see, that gives us a really good chance at understanding that this material is behaving in a predictable way. It is a little light, okay? And with the addition of the whiteness here, it feels even brighter. Like that feels darker as a material than this, of course, because like we tend to create that, like to smudge things a little bit sometimes, especially from like a distance. So what I will do is I'll go into my black paint, and I know that for my base color, we created this correction, base color, 95%, and has been left alone. That doesn't make sense. Did I play with the base color or something? I have the feeling that I lightened it at some point. Yeah, with the color noise I did. All right, a good way to check, like if you're adding layers, like for example here, this color noise is overlaid at 100%. That's weird. Oh no, it's 8. Yeah, so that should be 100%, and that should be 8 at most. And this was on divide. That's why it was working. So let's do it on divide. Okay, so say I want all that color, right? But I want to still darken this to 2727. I can temporarily create a paint layer that has a base color value of 2727. Okay, create a little dot over there. Go back to my base color over here, and right under the paint layer, if I do my levels over the paint layer, which I just can't do it just like that, but if I do it here on the base variation, or I level these two together, then I'll be able to match these colors better. Okay, so how do I do that? This is my darkness check. There's a thing that I'll be using a lot in this series, which is the pass-through layers. So if I do color correct here, I'm on the base color. If I set this to pass-through, we should have seen a change here. We didn't. If I set this layer to pass-through, all the information on the layers below is going to render on top of this layer. That has to be done on a paint layer, not on a fill layer. It has to be done on a paint layer because a paint layer is empty. So I'll add levels to this color correct, and I have base color information. If I set this to normal, it's empty. If I do pass through, it has info. Okay. So now I can color correct to kind of get to that level of, like, I'm eyeballing it a little bit, which isn't maybe the best thing to do. Also, one of the things that you can do maybe is up the tiling of this so that you have enough empty space. Let's see. So now I know that this is the level of black. So I should be able to match this little pixel to that other pixel. That's the most rudimentary way to do this that I can imagine. So that is right there. Okay, so now I can just go back to my normal color noise with a tiling of 5, and it still feels brighter because there's a lot of color. So I might want to just adjust that a little bit. So if I wanted to adjust that color, I can do it like that. And with my pass through, I can alter all my layers below. Okay. So that color noise should go back to, like, I can maybe exaggerate it a bit. Maybe instead of 8, I can do like 10. I don't think it needed exaggeration though. I might just be trying to compensate for something else. But now I think generally that's kind of like darker. Oh, it moves really fast. Can you like do this? No, arrow keys don't work. Scroll doesn't work. So it's very sensitive. So maybe just something like that. And now we should have a little bit more of that color noise while still maintaining PBR. Now there's one more thing I want to do for the base material that I think is very important for materials like these, and that is faceted normals. Now, that's not an easy filter to do, to make. It's easier to just take it. So I'm just going to look for it because I know I have it linked on one of my blog posts. If we go over here, we have this Ben Redmond faceted normals filter. And hopefully it still works on this version of Substance, because that's 2020 and a lot might have changed. Now, I don't think I can redistribute all of these resources. So if you want to follow, you're going to have to look for the hints. For example, Google Ben Redmond, maybe take the link and like write it manually. Like I don't think I can like go and put this filter on my Google Drive. But I know these are like sort of like not open source, but like free to use. So I'll extract this, and then I'll grab this and I'll put this on Substance Painter. And I think I'll put this in as a texture. I know it might have like we might want to do it like as a base matte, but I think I'll do it as a texture just to check, and I'll put this on filters. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Now, what is this? So if we think about, now, as far as I understand, okay, like I'm no expert at like physics, but what roughness is pretty much it is simulating the micro surface variations of a surface, right? So if this is like your plastic surface at a macroscopic level, what it is simulating is this, okay? The way it is simulating this, so at a micro level, like roughness will simulate this, okay? This variation. So essentially, what happens in reality is when a light ray bounces off of something, if it's bouncing off of a flat area or a very flat surface, so a polished surface, then it should come like it should appear like very shiny. Okay, I'm not gonna get very specific because it's also a little late for my brain to be explaining these things. I do these things better at 9 a.m. But in any case, what we're replicating is this. Okay, the um specularity, I think. No, not specularity, but object glossiness. Hopefully we can get a little map. But in essence, yeah, so the way it is replicating, or what this is doing is, this is your camera, this is your light. So let's do the camera as a box. And if a surface is rough, like it will kind of diffuse the light, okay? Um, Before it gets to the camera. So it will just appear as if that sort of light has gotten larger or smaller, okay? And essentially um, give the appearance of diffused light, okay? Again, I'm not no physicist, but I know that the way that I understand it is that roughness is replicating this effect by taking the reflection and masking it, okay? So it is at like somewhat equal parts kind of like masking out. So if you look here, this part of the reflection is being masked out of the um, of the bounce, okay? So we're not seeing that part, like same here, same here, same here. But no matter like what direction we look, like that part is like, well, kind of not reflecting back the same way. Um, if we replicate reflection this way, we're achieving like a semi-realistic way of creating surface variation. Oh, this is so difficult to explain sometimes. This is one of those times. If we use surface like normal faceting, what we're doing essentially is we're replicating this thing at the bottom a little bit more efficiently. So by faceting the normals, or like the way I understanding is we're bending them, those light rays are going to be interacting with a normal map that actually changes the direction of that surface. So if we change the direction of the surface, what we're doing is we're changing the direction at which the ray bounces back. So rather than masking it and blurring it, we're creating more of like a broken mirror effect, which is called normally anisotropy. Is it called like that? Anisotropy with an I. And that sort of anisotropy, you can probably Google it better than I can because I'm terrible at finding this info. But this effect will help us kind of like move the direction of the rays. So it is going to essentially create a more realistic bounce of the light. My God, that took me a second. Sorry about that. Probably I should have these explanations written down somewhere to kind of access them and not kind of like explain this from the top of my head. But it's okay, you know. I hope you can forgive me about that. I think the visual example is a little bit more relevant. So on this base variation, we're going to have a special layer of the filter. sorry, a special fill for this filter, and we're going to call this facets, facet normals. And if we take this filter into our normals, and we input the anchor point, I think that was called paint noise, and we go into a normal map channel. Let's see, it is now not doing much. I remember that this was a problem, so I might have to create this like myself. Let's see. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that was a problem. Yeah, so I am not able to see any of this like happening. Maybe it doesn't have to go on the normal, it has to go on the material source, but since I imported it as that, it's not going to work. I'll have to put it as a base material. Maybe there's a tutorial, like the guy gave us a tutorial. I didn't do it. Yeah, that looks better. And then paint noise. Yeah, but I'm still not seeing that in the, because I should come from noises. But no, I'm not seeing that. I think no matter how much, yeah, from the normal channel, I'm not able to. So it might not be compatible anymore with Substance or something. It might not be mapping the channels correctly. Yeah, no channel mapped. So, okay, I'll tell you what. I think maybe one of my students can send me this filter because I know most of you have it. But I think that's waiting a bit much, maybe. I think I can probably do it in Designer. Yeah, let's do it. Fuck it. So I'm gonna create a filter. I'm going to create the filter myself. Okay, so I'm in Designer now, and I'll create an empty, and I'll call this like facet normals custom. Okay, and I am very interested to quickly take a look at I think there is in the Surface Imperfections website, there is a little explanation that should be much better than mine. Probably a little bit more, worked on and meditated. So the fingerprint as much as that you can anisotropy rotation orientation map. I mean, it is what I have in my head, but I am having issues at like bringing that to you. But the best way to understand this, and if you allow me like a recap, is roughness like will mask in general terms. Roughness gives more of an effect of masking the specular, and facets or faceting anisotropy is going to give more the effect of rotating or displacing, not so much displacing. It's going to give the effect more of, what's the word? I think rotating or this, yeah, let's like rotating the normals. Let's do. It's going to rotate not rotate the normal, sorry, rotate the, oh my, it's rotating the specularity. That's fine, Genie, don't worry, we'll do it. Okay, so how do we do this? We essentially are cheating here. So we have to be very careful when using this. And I'm going to create a very crude and rudimental sort of filter here, but that's fine. So I'm going to view this in 3D view as my normals. Okay, and these are already broken for some reason, most likely because I don't have like a normal filter. Okay, but now that I have a normal filter, I should be able to see my normals properly. Okay, so let's do these. Let's see. Maybe I can do this on a flat face. There we go. Okay. So the idea here is that we're going to take our noise and we're going to apply it to the green and red channel of our normal map in order to create that sort of anisotropy filter. So I'm going to grab, just for an example, these black and white spots, and I'm going to be blending these normals with the result of, let's see, RGBA merge for red and green, and I'll do some stuff in between here. For blue, I think we need a flat color, and I'm kind of rushing through this because if it works, I'll just paste it on the Google Drive now so that you can get the files. All right, sorry, that should be grayscale. Okay, so what we have here is that, and that will blend better. We don't need an alpha, but I can just do the white. Okay, and by doing this, like if you see this, you pay close attention, we can maybe add some levels in between so that it's easier to see and just flatten this quite a bit. So what we want is, we want to move this between 128, 129 and 127. So pretty much like mid-gray values just shifted towards lighter or darker. So we really don't want to build this into, yeah, so let's flatten this. Okay. So you can see how this has a very, very similar effect to roughness. Let's use an anisotropic noise here. But the difference is that I can always, like if I find the right angle, I will always be able to see that specular. Let's compare this to roughness. Ah, I got it. Faceting distorts and roughness masks. I think this is the right way to put it. Took me a second, but I think that's the one. So if we pay attention to the difference, let's create quickly some output here. I think I have it there. Just output. And we're gonna put this on roughness, maybe the same grayscale. View in 3D view as roughness. Okay. And most likely I'll just unplug this for the from the normals. Sorry. Opa. This keyboard, I don't get used to it. I'll get second level so that I can do this a bit better. So let's get the full picture. Okay. So if you pay attention to this, our roughness is not getting distorted. It is getting masked, but we will always be able to see that sort of circle. And because it's getting masked a bit more or a bit less, it kind of gives the effect that it is being distorted. But in reality, it's just being masked more or less. It's a very similar effect. When we don't have roughness and we create this, the effect is a lot more like this. We're actually displacing the specular while not masking it, while not blurring it. So we're able to create very interesting and different effects. So in a way, we can add this on top of roughness to simulate things like fingerprints. Fingerprints are great with this method. We can maintain like a very shiny surface. Like this is especially important for us because, well, we have a very shiny surface. And while maintaining the sensation of shininess, we can not just mask, but also distort the specularity to create interest without having to alter the appearance of our surface or the definition of our surface, aka shiny surface. Okay, so how do we take this to Substance Painter? So I can use anisotropy, I can use levels and RGBA merge. Okay. And I think the way to do this is going to be with, let's see, can I get maybe a contrast luminosity? So if I use contrast luminosity and I expose the luminosity, so I can do this twice. Okay, now we're distorting this like a lot. but I can distort the luminosity like this, so make this pretty much like almost white. And if I make this white, we should get like a shiny surface back, like pretty much what we're getting, except for we're not building correct normals here because we are generating a white normal. Okay, so if you understand normals, a normal map is composed by, like a flat normal map is three channels. So 128 in red, 128 in green, and 255 in blue. In general terms, you can go at 128 for all of them, and I think it will work the same. But because blue is no 255 blue. Well, I don't even know. I'm so used to creating shaders in Unreal that I don't even consider blue anymore. But this should work, okay? Yeah, I think it's 128, 128, and 255. So these are like the three channels of a bitmap, of an RGB bitmap. Okay. So what we're doing now is we're shifting red and green so much towards white that we're getting like a bad normal. If we were to have 128 in the grayscale, 128 without, yeah, 128, 128. There we go. So our normal would be normal, will be working, right? With a white channel. So what we need to do is we kind of need to create a very small shift in these two channels. So I know this is maybe a little bit too technical. So if I play with luminosity, for example, from 0.75 to 1 on both, and then somehow normalize, which is something that I should do after also. Okay, so if I, yeah, I have to maybe blend this. Let's see. I'm gonna try a few different things. Whoop. Blend this with some 128, 128 here. And pretty much just treat this as like maybe multiply. So if I have this, I should be seeing like a decent normal map now. And then I should be able to essentially, let's get something glossy because I can't see very well what I'm doing. So let's see this in 3D view as like the roughness. Okay. So now I have a normal, like a normally functioning normal map. And like this, I can play with it. Okay. But if I were at 0.5 and I could go up and down, that would be a lot better. So I think I could probably do that with levels. Because like this, I can't really tweak it, I think. Like I can only move things in one direction, pretty much this positive direction. But I have no way of moving things back in the other direction, which is a thing I should be able to do. I've done this in the past. So, but this is the same story as always, that I don't do it enough to kind of like remember what I should be doing or to keep it in my memory. Oh well. Let's see. I think maybe a histogram could be a good idea. Like shift? No. Let's try the different scan. No, also no. Okay, so since like we're okay with doing this like in a rudimental way and not having to polish everything, I'll just have something that works for this purpose of this texture and do some research on what I did in the past because I should have that filter, or some of my students should have it. I changed computer recently, so I don't have it right now. But what I will do is I'll just do this and this, And this should give us the filter. So blend mode multiply, and we're going to go from 0.75 all the way to 1. Actually, we'll make that 0.8 because I don't think I'll need that much, 0.8 and 0.8. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to expose this as a new graph input, and I'm going to call this red variation. Whoop, sorry, I need that on both. Okay. Well, red variation and green variation. I'll put it on the label, like this should be the label also. Okay, and I must not forget one thing. I'll come back to that. Put that on the label. Okay, and I need to replace this histogram with an input. This is super crude, but it should work. How many times will I say that again? Probably a million. So this is going to be my noise input. Okay. And I should have some sort of faceted normals that works. Let's get a normal of flat gray in here. Let's get this out of the way. Grayscale 128. I don't recommend doing that because yeah, let's just leave it like this if it works. I'll do OpenGL for the format, although we can always expose this normal format. Okay. And I'll say this is my normal map and label will be normal map. So that's a lot of information for one stream. And I'll save this as downloads, essentials of texturing, and that shouldn't be there. Facet normals custom. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Just can you like save it here? Essentials of texturing, please. There you go. And I'll right click and publish the BSAR. Okay. And we should have an empty filter pretty much. But this time I will plug it in as a texture. So it'll be a texture on my filters. Okay. And let's try with this. All right, so that's on, that should be only on the normals right there. We're out of the box shifting colors. So that tells me it's working. And on the noise input, we should be adding the paint noise from the noises. Okay, so there is some information here now. Let's bring the levels up. Okay, so what is this doing? This is creating some sort of like car paint effect. This is great. This is a great effect for things like, I mean, the other versions of, for example, the Leica M2. I can't even remember the name of it. I'm so tired. But we'll finish with this. But this sort of chrome. This sort of chrome effect. This effect is great for chrome. Like if we add metallic to this and a proper color, we will get pretty much the material right off the box. Obviously, it's important to understand that this is breaking the normals right now. So if we look at the reflection, let's get a little point just to calibrate this. If my normals are moving so much, that means I'm breaking my bakes. So let's look at some areas that have been baked. So for example, this. So my facet normals might create, they're not, but they might create seams if I do it like that. So I have to calibrate this. But this process is really, really simple. The process of calibration is just to take that right there. We can just take all the roughness out and just our just get our object. I'll just add a fill. I think for good measure, I'll get a fill here and I'll make sure that my roughness is completely flat. This way, let's see. Okay. So I guess I'll do it on top. So roughness, yeah, this way I can really see that like what I'm doing here. Okay. So if I plug it, I turn it on, and I get that reflection close enough. And this is why I was saying like this might not be good enough, but because I'm still shifting. Yeah, I'm still shifting this, but I'm shifting this in the direction. Like I can only do it in one direction. Hmm. Okay, so from this base, it shouldn't be too complex to get that. So luminosity will only allow me to make brighter. I'm on multiply. So, okay, that really shouldn't be difficult. Let me just get gray. Oh, there's no input right now. Let me quickly get the like that noise, some noise. Okay. So I'm essentially not affecting whites. I'm just affecting the blacks, right? So I should be affecting both lights and darks, at least on this blending. All right. So another patch. I'll just do a patch. So this luminosity, we're going to call red variation positive or pause, and green variation pause. And this is not technically going to fix it, but if I could change the base color, I think I can. This is so janky. Like, all right, but I'll do it anyways. So this is red neg. Oh my god, I hate doing this, but it's funny because it showcases that there's many ways to do some things, and this I'll call all right, I'll just reset it, and I'll create a new one, and I'll do green neg. Okay, and if I export this again, all right, sorry, not export, but publish. I kind of should be able to play with that. So I'll get my noise input here, paint noise. Like my advice right now is don't do this. Wait until I can find the way. Because this is just like super, super bad. Like it's messing with so many things. But like I'm doing this more like as a self challenge than anything. The idea is that like if we do zero point 0.5 on both, I should be able to move this in the other direction. Yeah, kind of like that. You can see like in a way what I'm doing is I'm stretching it and then I'm moving it. So if I figure out the position, kind of, I can like put it back to its place, and that's quite close. So we'll do 0.98, 0.98, and then we can just like play with the position. I mean, that's super close. 0.51 maybe. I don't know if that's enough. Okay, so we need to do it more. All right, a little less. Can I click? Thank you. 3.5 maybe. 3.4 maybe. Sorry, 0.4. Man, that's such a big change. I mean, we're quite close, not gonna lie. That's in the same spot, but just, I mean, we could argue that in a way this is more powerful than the other one because it gives me more control over first position and then the amount of yeah, but like I'm shifting the normals completely. I mean, like I think that's what I'm doing. Like I'm not just moving the specular, like the sorry, that this distortion. What I'm doing is I'm changing the color of the normal like right away. So I don't think that's a great thing to do. But I think that's like calibrated enough, right? No, it's moved. So maybe yeah, that'd be okay. Like a little bit of that. So because we're never going to use this effect that's such a strong. Um, That perfection that was left at the door decided to come in. Agreed. So for now, that's good. And if we cannot see any errors coming from that, then we should be quite happy. And I think I'm not seeing any errors coming from this. Like it's just distorting and doing what it needs to do. And for like a patch, I would say that's pretty good. Okay, so we're going to be using this not at its full, like obviously that looks insanely strong. So even more for my case of not being such a perfectionist is that we're going to tone this down and just use it as some like backup detailing. So right now this is using the paint noise, but I think it should be using the surface scratches. So I could anchor here and do surface, yeah, like surface scratches, although I'm kind of anchoring just for the sake of like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna copy, what is this? Metal, aluminum, 27. So I can do that like 27 metal, aluminum, and yeah, unfortunately it needs to be with, it needs to come with levels, for which I used to have another filter that included levels in textures. So, let's keep it like that. I could, although I could isolate the facet normals. And because what I want to essentially transfer is my roughness, I could just normal faceting. I could just get rid of all of this and create a small anchor point that captures, so rough capture. So capture roughness, go into the roughness, create a pass through. Now I have my roughness here. That's what this is showing. I can anchor it and now go into my facet normals and use this rough capture. And that should be coming in to the normals now. So I should be getting the faceting together with the scratches, which to be honest is not giving me like enough of a difference to justify all that work. All right. Yeah, it doesn't, it's not building a case for like in its favor. So let's just keep it like that for now. Let's not do the, oh, is that the world telling me stop it? Most likely. Let's see how much we lost. We have an autosave from a couple of hours ago. That's insane. That's good. That's great. I mean, we might be at a decent point, maybe right before starting like the filter. No, not really. I'm not very happy about that. So, what, like I get no. Oh, okay. We have one from not so long ago. That's why you want to save a lot, not like me. That's fine. Okay, we have this. I'll save this as our main file. That's not the one. Essentials of texturing on Leica M2. And I think we have a very decent base material right now, and definitely good grounds for what's about to come. So on like week 2, our goal, I think we have created material definition and surface interest successfully. We have also done our planning. And then on the second week, we wanted to do our material variations. In this case, I'm going to focus most likely only on the brassing, since I do already have also the leather being textured and so on. So I could just probably bring that from my other file. I mean, if this generates like a huge amount of interest, then I could do the leather. But like for now, I think that this is going to be a lot. So for week 2, I think we have created a good material for our black paint. It's interesting, okay, and it's definitely our base, like a good base material. On the material variation side, we will create the brass, and we will start to draft the wear if I have time for that, because I tend to explain things deeply or carefully, maybe too much. I'm not sure. I would love that feedback. But as I said, like on the description of this event, I don't want to rush this. I prefer to explain things properly than to cater for like fast content, which is a thing I hate actually, because then you want this information and you can never find it. So I prefer to take slow steps rather than fast ones and kind of not provide quality content. So on the next session, we'll do the brass. We'll stop. I think we'll stop with the paint here because we could detail, we should, and we will detail it further. But I think at this point it's not worth it because we don't see it in context properly. So it was a good moment to stop actually, because like other than the variation of the paint with the normals, probably I wouldn't have done much on it. So when it comes to wear drafting, again, we might do that on week 3 because that is a really important part. It's pretty much like blocking out your composition, your texture, your model texture composition, which is a really important part, and I really want to put a lot of care on that. And then when it comes to polishing, we're surely going to be adding a lot more detail to these materials. But I think for now, we should have a decent amount of content for the first week. So as I said on the video description here, I'm not sure if I can access it myself, probably by clicking here. If you go, whoa, shut up. You can just click here and get my Substance Painter file, okay? I'm gonna leave my custom facet normals. I'm going to clean this up a bit. Also, like the references are important. I think this should not be shared. I'm going to try, yeah, I'm just going to give you these 2 files as extras so that you don't have to figure out the normal map part. And then on the Discord server, we have the prop art channel, in which I would love you guys to, if you're ever going to be following this tutorial, not tutorial, but the series together with me, I would love to see what you end up doing. So feel free to find your own references. There's a million variations of Leicas. You can go for your Chrome Leica M2. If you go to Leica M, you're gonna find a lot of like different, a lot of different models. You'll find your titanium, your platinum, your golden Thailand. Like that's actually a version that I like. It's the I think this was gifted to the Thailand king, so it's like a golden. This is a different model, the M6, but so feel free to go insane with the model, and maybe you want to go classic, maybe you want to just follow the black paint, the same that I'm doing. Maybe you want the Arctic white, edition, or maybe you just want to do the safari, which is also a beautiful color scheme. Although I'm not sure they were doing it for the M2, but like improving on reality is important when doing this. Just take your references, and if you're able to translate to a model, then great, do it. Now, my advice, if you're fast, polish. But don't rush the process. Don't try to impress the community. What will impress the community is well-made work, not fast work. If you go to a restaurant, in my opinion, I'd rather wait 10 more minutes for a quality burger than go to McDonald's and just get something fast. Okay? So if we're talking about quality and of taste, definitely if things take time, that's never a problem. or at least for me, it isn't. So take your time, do things properly, and I would love to see what you end up doing. Again, the Prop Art channel is the place. And with that, I'll say goodbye for today. Hopefully, there was something of quality that you take away from this session. And yeah, have a great afternoon. Alrighty. Bye bye.